Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It seems that every single politician, media outlet, and their own grandma are willing to talk about the difficulties Ukraine is having on the front line and projecting that they're going to be collapsing any day now. Well, we've heard all of this before, yet Ukraine still stands. So let's look at the front line and what's actually happening there to have a realistic perception of what is going to happen. And I think the best example we can look at right now is Kupyansk. Kupyansk is interesting because this is the city that Putin 3 weeks ago said is completely captured by Russians. And now, just a couple of days ago, he has been saying that Russians have captured it so much that they actually already moved all the way past to the south and are already capturing this area right over here that is called Kupyansk Vyslovy. So basically capturing almost all of this area, or at least controlling it. And well, we're looking at the deep state map here. We see that, yeah, something doesn't really add up. Because the truth of the matter is, Russians here bit more than they can chew, realistically. It seems that their plan was, well, we cannot really advance through this part right over here. Sinkivka specifically has been a major pain in the butt for a lot of the Russians as they try to kind of bypass the settlement. But because of the position and just geography of that settlement, it's almost an insurmountable fortress, so to say, for the Russian forces. And every time they tried to advance over here, they were always assaulted from the side and destroyed later on. They needed to advance towards the south because this is the river that was going here. But Russians thought that they found the solutions to it. They were able to cross the river, establish themselves on this western side of the river, and from there move southwards, moving further away from Sinkivka and enter the city of Kupyansk. And at first, it did seem so that it was the case. The problem for Russians was that they've decided to do it very directly, go straight from Kupyansk. As you know, Russians would usually prefer to encircle any kind of settlement. So if there is a settlement, then Russians would kind of approach it. Then there would be attack on one side, would be attack on the other side, almost encircling the settlement, and then they would push the Ukrainians out while Ukrainians are having real big difficulties with logistics. This is not what they have been doing with Kupyansk. In Kupyansk, Russians completely entered the city, just very nicely started roaming through the city, and it backfired horribly because Ukrainians counterattacked to the north, complicating a lot of logistical supplies for Russians. They also counterattacked around the crossing where Russians are having and now controlling that territory by drones, inflicting major damages on the Russian logistics. And more importantly, Ukrainian forces entered the south and western part of Kupyansk and already are retaking some of the positions within the city. Now, I don't want to paint any kind of picture that Ukraine is about to push Russians out. This is still not the case. Russia still has the advantage in resources, and only expectation for us should be that Ukraine can delay Russians, inflict damage, but ultimately Russians will continue advancing. That is the proper ground basis until Ukraine solves the issues that we're going to touch upon later. But point of the matter is, we just recently saw videos like these with Ukrainians fighting right in the middle of the city of Kupyansk. So these fightings that are happening over there with Ukrainian squads operating, able to move around, even with all of the drones and everything, are stating that the position there is, I don't want to say secure enough, but at least it's definitely contested where Ukrainians are able to perform ground operations in the area. This specific video was geolocated actually right over here. So it is located right in the middle of the city of Kupyansk. I can kind of show you the approximate border of that town. That's the approximate border. So surprise, surprise, Putin actually lied and they don't control the city. They don't even control even the biggest part of the city. It's just some of the northern parts that they're now being pushed out of. And before moving towards the north, it is worth mentioning the situation around Vovchansk in the north. Here, Ukrainian armed forces are reporting that Russians are exerting more pressure, and they have been trying to exert a lot of pressure for a while now. And now it seems that they were able to cross the river and potentially are going to be pushing Ukrainians further towards the south. We will see how the situation will develop. It could be counterattacked by Ukrainians, yet it is still something I am well aware of. Situation around Lyman is becoming pretty contested. As we were expecting, Lyman is now becoming a frontline city after Russians were able to push through from Yampil. They were able to go around the northern side of Yampil, and now they are factually already have been noticed on the outskirts of Lyman. Plus, we also have reports that Russians are trying to move from the northern side right over here. So far, Ukrainians are able to slow them down significantly, but I would not think that this is something that Ukrainians can do forever. So Lyman is slowly but surely becoming the frontline settlement, but Russians will take quite a notable time before they can capture this town. Yet we should expect that the battle for Lyman will be ongoing very soon. And Russian advances around the Lyman direction is also helping a lot towards the Siversk. Siversk had stayed fast for a while, mostly because there was a defense of Siversk protected by this northern side and also by the southern side. Now, with the northern side following to the Russians with the Lyman, and Russians are able to essentially flank Ukrainians, the northern protection of Siversk fell down. Ukrainians tried to salvage it a little bit, but it exposed them also on the southern border. And now we have some interesting developments in Siversk. Now, Russians have already been noted within the city of Siversk itself. But what we should be looking for here is specifically whether or not Russians will be able to cross this river very quickly. Because so far, Russians were able to be detected only in this eastern part of the city. And crossing of the river is the most important part of defense of this town that will be there. What is more troublesome is that the same river supposedly has been crossed by Russians in this direction, as there was a video last week of Russians executing prisoners of war in this area. Yeah, by the way, Russian war crime, just so you don't think that Russia didn't commit any war crimes this week. This is already beyond this river Bakhmutka. But as you can see, this river actually splits over here from Siversk. It continues to both flow north, but it also flows here, and this will go uphill actually. So the territory towards the north from this is going to be a bit of uphill for Russians. So we'll see how this area, whether or not Russians will be advancing fast or not. A situation around Pokrovsk. As I do every week, I need to state that no, Russians have not captured Pokrovsk, and no, the situation is still controllable. And I even got a little bit of vindication for my statements again, compared to some of the other people that are stating different things. So the biggest developments against the situation in Pokrovsk is actually what is happening in Mirnograd, essentially a brother city or a sister city right next to Pokrovsk. And this is what is happening in the eastern part of Mirnograd and the southern part of Mirnograd. Here, Russians have conducted a lot of mechanized assaults, including some of the vehicles, but also a lot of dedicated offensives towards this direction. And with the mechanized assaults, I mean, I cannot show you the video. You know why, because this is YouTube. We have a little bit of a video here from the Russians where you can see them trying to move towards the city of Pokrovsk. And I think this is actually a pretty good indication on how the modern mechanized assaults look like for Russians. So these tanks, as you can see, they are fully covered with armor. I don't think they can rotate their turret at all. So they're just used as an armored transport. just to kind of move forward and get the troops towards the frontline positions. But the majority of attempts by Russians to advance towards their position usually end up in something like this, where you can see on the background some of the fighting is happening. But most importantly, there's going to be, yep, there it is. There was a anti-tank mine that just got the track of the vehicle that was moving here as a head of the column. And that is how it's always happening. It's either a drone or track vehicle, and Russians are forced to move in to capture the town. And a lot of people are asking, Georgie, but why is Russia advancing? What, like, Ukraine is defending. We see these columns being destroyed. Why is Russia advancing? And my answer is very simple, the one that I always say, that Russia has resources and it is willing to sacrifice these resources. And that is why it's advancing, because they can just do it despite everything. To put it in perspective, on the direction of Pokrovsk, specifically this area right over here, actually I would take this one as well, Russia has concentrated 140,000 big assault force. 140,000. They're not obviously all operating at the same time, they're rotating, but still 140,000. To put it in a perspective, what 140,000 armed forces is about 2 times the regular forces of United Kingdom. Or it's about the absolute total of the armed forces of France. So it's not a small quantity right over here. And the fact that Ukrainians, despite the difficulty of situation, are still able to control, resist, delay is actually a fantastic achievement. But there are issues, and we are talking on this channel about those issues. But more importantly, there is no panic here. There is no, like, the situation is completely done for and so on. Because just recently, just today actually, we got notifications that, by the way, 3 weeks ago, there was a big of an issue of Ukrainians being in this pocket right over here. And there came order from the head command, from Siversk and so on, to pull out these forces. And it was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. So all of the people that are saying this, like, oh, Ukrainians are encircled, there is no way for them to exit and so on. The truth of the matter is, if we look at the situation 3 weeks ago, this pocket over here didn't look that menacing. And there was an order said to pull the Ukrainian armed forces out. So my problem is the data doesn't fit. Because on one side, people says, oh, Ukraine is fully encircled. Yet then we see videos of Ukrainians operating in the northern side of Pokrovsk. Just recently, we had geolocations from this area. We say, oh, Ukrainians are already completely encircled and they are here in this deep pocket. But now we supposedly get notification that Ukrainians left this pocket 3 weeks ago. So my point is that Ukrainian command does know what they're doing. And despite of all of the speculation, it seems that what they're doing is obviously they want to fight this fight. They're not giving it up, but they're also not living in some fantasy world reality where they don't understand when their forces are being encircled. So I think we need to understand that there are a lot of issues within Ukrainian armed forces, but understanding of the situation, specifically with the videos and all of the pictures coming through, with Siversk talking with brigade commanders specifically in this area of operation, we should not be surprised that Ukrainians are staying on the positions that they more or less can control. And the fact that the fighting is hard should not surprise anyone. This is war. And before we continue our overview of the front lines, guys, please continue participating in Fundraiser. The best thing we can do is to support Ukrainian armed forces. Participate in our fundraiser for the 93rd Brigade Black Raven Battalion to get them the FPV drones they need. And remember, if you're living in the United States, you have a very special option to support the fundraiser. Art Wine has imported quite a lot of sparkling wine from Ukrainian Bakhmut before it got captured by the Russians. And now they're willing to send the fundraiser parts of the proceeds from the sales of every bottle or a package or whatever. In my book, that is a win-win-win, especially with New Year's coming up and other holidays. So consider purchasing yourself a bottle of Ukrainian history and some sparkling wine to support the fundraiser for Ukraine. Moving from Pokrovsk towards the south, not only we got good news of Ukrainians recapturing Ivanivka and pushing Russians back, we also got a lot of news of small Ukrainian counterattacks in a lot of their Russian forward operation positions, where they were able to put a lot of pressure on the Russians to prevent their advances further north. Now, I obviously would cheer for that a lot, but it is clear why this is happening. It is because Russians are usually drawn to the places where they have some success on the front line. So as much as I want to celebrate that Ukrainians are able to prevent further Russian advances, it is clear for me that Russians have just relocated these forces from attacking towards the north over here and more focusing on Hulyai right over here, where Russians had some success. But as I said, the most critical part of this attack by Russians is how fast they will be entering Hulyai, and it hasn't really happened yet, and how fast they would be able to cross this river. Here specifically, there was a fighting in Dobropilya, and Russians at first claimed that they actually entered and captured the settlement. But surprise, surprise, Ukrainians actually posted a video with them being present still in the settlement. And before we finish, firstly, a video here from the Russians where they are extremely shocked seeing like a whole parking lot here on the roof where Ukrainian fighting drones are just parked and waiting to get activated. I cannot put you the audio because Russian is just cursing here and saying, oh my God, how insane it is that Ukrainians have so many drones battle ready right here in this area. But more importantly, we talk about the tough situation of Ukrainian armed forces on the front line. And I always underscore that there are certain issues. And I think one of the most sober analysis and review without any kind of panic or clickbaity headlines came here from Serhiy Sobko. He's a Ukrainian general and a hero of Ukraine. It's a title with an award that comes to it. And he wrote an expose here describing what can Ukraine do with their armed forces going forward. You can either read it here or you can just look up his name. It's on Facebook. I'm pretty sure you can find it as well. And in a nutshell, it talks about the armed forces situation inside of the armed forces and what can be done. Firstly, his analysis is not panic spreading. His analysis is pretty sober. He says that there's a lot of issues. He says that the army that Ukraine has built since 2022 was built on a lot of premises of this internal uprising. However, now the situation changed, and by 2025, Ukrainian military needs to reevaluate what kind of military it wants to be going further, because now emotions have slowed down a little bit, and it's now more of a systematic day-to-day work, and this needs to be treated in a more systematic fashion. So the point that he's making, and I think I agree with, is that a lot of things can be done with Ukrainian military. He underscores that systematic changes are what is necessary for Ukraine to prevail, and he underscores that better training and long-term longevity, essentially, is what Ukrainian military needs the most right now. And the fact that it was voiced by such a high-level person, so to say, in Ukrainian society and also the military circles, I think this is overall a great show that there is an understanding in Ukraine of what things needs to be done. But most importantly, not a single word here about the collapse and that everything is just going to come to ruin. No, no, no. He actually says that it's not going to be about ruin or not ruin. It's going to be about just continue on as it is and victory. And I think that's a good way to think about this. And to finish on a high note, we know that Russians don't want to fight this war, and oftentimes they desert. Well, it seems that Russian drones are already doing the same because they cannot deal with the Russian bullshit anymore. So we have this video right over here of Russian drone just giving up, so to say. Yep, it's ready to go and gone. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. Slava Ukraini. I'm sorry, my voice is still recovering, but I still love you, and I will see you next time.